Welcome, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome everybody to ACMP Southern California chapter webinar. My name is Anta Pruszinska-Garcia. I'm the president of the chapter currently, and I'm just delighted to have fantastic presenters helping and sharing their knowledge and experiences from the recent ACMP conference in Orlando. Just as housekeeping, the webinar is being recorded, and it will be available for all chapter members at a later date. All attendees are on mute. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat function in Zoom, and we should be able to get back to you via chat or unmute you to ask your question. But for quality of the recording, we're asking everybody to stay on mute unless you have a question. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenters, chapter members, Shauna Gale, Carl, if you are on yet, wave to me because I need to unmute you. Carl, one of our board members, should be joining us shortly. Joel, and Joel, I cannot pronounce your name in a non-Polish way, so I will ask you to do that. Or let me try. Was it Nalewajek?
Very good, yep.
Can I say it in Polish? Because it is a Polish name. It would be Nalewajek, and it's difficult to say it in any other way. Rashima Sanders will be joining us and presenting as well, and I will close, but I will ask a few of other speakers who were in that same session that I want to highlight to please chime in because it was such a good one. So, this was the theme of the conference. Change is universal, and it really felt, for me, from my perspective, ACMP Global Conference was what brought me to the organization. I attended the first one in Orlando years ago before becoming a member of ACMP, and I joined right before the conference ended. The conference was really, for me, the reason to seek other like-minded local individuals to start a local chapter, because those conferences are always so motivational and inspirational. There's so much good information there that I wanted to continue that throughout the year. So this webinar is exactly that, giving back for all of us who got to go and felt like we're home among friends and learning from expert friends in our field there. We want to bring it to you, and we want to bring that learning to you throughout the year as part of the chapter. So change is universal, and this were the theme of this year. It was really well done, really pretty. I do want to call out that the Orlando conference was really highlighting next year's conference, and I think everybody knows where it's at. Look what we brought home. I know it's tiny on my camera, you can't see that, but you can see it on the picture. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody next year in Anaheim. We've been promoting our chapter with our stickers, and we still have some, so come to our events, you will get some stickers. And then throughout the halls, throughout the location, there were directional signs with, get the conversation going, start the conversation. So that was really interesting. And of course, this was Orlando. We were at the Universal Resort, so there were some wizards, right, and singing toads, but the true wizards are here. Carl and I got to meet with Tim Creasy from ProSci and Ali. They're phenomenal. Ali is the person at ProSci who helps us set up all the trainings that we're doing. Definitely more to come on that. So it was really good to meet with them. And this is a true group of wizards. So we're missing Rashima on this picture. We have a few other ACMP Southern California members who attended. This is a good subset, but my goal for Anaheim for next year is to have that big picture where, you know, the photographer has to climb somewhere to get us all as our chapter picture for next year. So with that energy, let's get started on sharing what we learned and what inspired us. Shauna, over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Shauna Gale, and I'm one of the members of ACMP SoCal. So one of the sessions that I found very informative and meaningful was Change and the Learning Brain. And that was presented by Lauren Waldman. She is the founder of Learning Pirate, as it says on the screen, and you can look her up on LinkedIn. She's a great presenter, and I highly recommend, if you see her at any other conferences, that you go see whatever it is she's going to present to you. So if we can go to the next slide. So what her conversation was about was really about what happens to your brain as you're going through change, and especially if you're looking at it through the lens of constant change, which is pretty much where we're at this point in time. One of the things that she talked a little bit about that I wanted to touch on was the actual brain itself and what does it look like. And so these two pictures were things that she described to us on the screen, and she had them without the benefit of those nice little actual keynotes on either side. And it was just to show that the connectivity in your brain, which is on the left-hand side of the screen if you're looking at it, looks remarkably like the structure of the universe, which is on the right-hand side. And that all of those bits and pieces that are lit up on the right-hand side in the universe are, you know, connectors, but the same pattern happens when you look at it from your brain. And this is taken from an MRI, I believe. So I thought this was a very interesting slide that kind of takes into the vantage point that your brain looks kind of like the universe. So I want to go to the next slide. The other thing about her presentation that she hit on is really with regards to how people get stuck. And those connectors in the picture that is previous is really about how you learn, how you recall things, and the pathways that are created when you learn something for the first time. And really how you can learn, unlearn, and relearn an activity. And so what we talked about was really, you know, in order for people to progress through change, they need to acknowledge what they have learned. They need to unlearn that if they're going to actually accept the change, and then relearn it the new way. And I think that this was a really good depiction of kind of what the pathway is, and really acknowledging the fact that we tend to go to what we know, and that's because it's a learned behavior. So in order for us to actually change that behavior, we need to consciously unlearn it and then relearn it in the new way. So that was kind of what this segment was all about. So if we want to go to the next slide. So as part of the conversation, when we were talking about learn, unlearn, and relearn, what she wanted to kind of get us to understand is that things that we've adopted and have learned from others, from osmosis, from our readings, from looking at things on the web, may not really be true. And so she had a segment of her presentation where we did go through some true or false questions. And this is question number 1, and we had 5 questions, and we won't go through all of them, but if you have a chance to look at her full presentation or experience it for yourself, I highly recommend it, because it was a really great thing to see. But this was the first question, which was, depending upon the person, you can be left hemisphere dominated or right hemisphere dominated, and that this helps define how you learn. And this is something that has been probably taught to lots of people over the course of their lifetime. And it was interesting to see the audience participation and what the ultimate answer to this question was. So as a poll for the folks who are on the line, what do you think that this answer is? Is that true or is it false?
And you can use the chat if you'd like to share with the group. Please just chat to everyone.
So it looks we have a couple of folks, some trues, some falses, some trues.
Yeah.
All right, well, based upon the research, the answer is?
Coming up slowly, sorry.
And this is what we mean by kind of learning and relearning things that you might have learned over the course of your lifetime, but based upon the current research, this is really a false statement. And so one of the other questions that she touched upon that I didn't pull a slide for was also with regard to whether or not, you have a learning style preference. And the answer to that question was also false. And some people might learn best by reading, some people might learn best by doing, some people might learn best by hearing, but that's actually not true either. The answer to that question based upon the research was also false. So it was really enlightening to see the things that we've gone through and experienced in our life, and then based upon current research might be completely false. So it just hit home and reinforced the fact that you need to look at what you've learned, potentially unlearn things that are not actually current or of use anymore, and then relearn the information again. And that helps you to broaden your neural pathways, which is that picture up at the beginning that we talked about with regards to what your brain looks like. So that's kind of the overview. Just wanted to kind of give a shout out to her. Again, it's Lauren Waldman, the Learning Pirate. And her call from the pirate is Yar, which is you had all of us in the audience kind of acknowledge throughout, which really means you are really ready. And so it's ready for you. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. That was one of the most surprising presentations to me in the style. It was very unconventional, I have to say. It was really interesting, and I have to give a shout out to Abraham in the responses to our question, or actually to Lauren's question. Did you all notice Abraham's response that the answer was true?
Yes.
Any questions for Shauna for this session? Excellent. All right. We're going to move to thank you, Shauna. We're going to move to our next session recap. And Carl, are you there?
Yes, I am here. However, I'm driving for the moment. I got out of an appointment very late today. Can you push me to the back end of the presentations?
We'll come back to you, yes.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Drive safely. All right, so I'm just going to skip through those slides here quickly, and Joel, you'll be up next.
Sounds good.
So those of you who are looking, you see it will be worth to stick to the end of the presentation to see Carl's slides and hear him speak about his takeaways. Joe, over to you.
All right, thanks, Anka. I picked a couple of different things that I want to share some quick hits on that were takeaways from me. The first one was kind of our keynote conversation. Actually, it was the address from the CEO and board of directors on our second day. And the name of the session was called Shaping the Future of Change Management, a Pivotal Conversation. So at the beginning of that conversation, they were just talking about the state of like where they have been as an organization. So I learned some information. Right now, the organization as of that time has 4,100 members. And then currently there are over 700 people that have earned the CCMP designation. And their initial message is that, you know, in reflecting over their time as an organization, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anka, I think they said this was like the 10th conference, so that it was kind of a milestone to start looking back and kind of looking forward.
Yep.
That they're saying they kind of, as they assess the organization, they feel that the organization overall is very healthy, it's in a good place, and it's a very appropriate time to start looking towards the future. They said that they have active, passionate volunteers, they're fully staffed, and they really want to start building on the accomplishments of developing the standard and the code of ethics and having the professional designation. Those are great accomplishments, but they don't want to just rest there. They want to kind of look forward to where change management can go. So to do that, it was essentially a very large brainstorming session with the most amount of people that I've ever seen do brainstorming. So it was quite an experience. So part of how they did that was by doing some polling, which I've seen done in a lot of situations. One key thing that I wrote down from that is that about 60% of the people at that session said that change management is gaining traction within organizations. So definitely very positive, and that number has increased over past times that they've asked that question. But then they had three general discussion questions. One was, how do you think the demand and need for change management is evolving and changing? The next question was, how do you think the role of the change practitioner is evolving or changing? And then finally, how do you think the way change management is integrated or deployed is changing or will change? And then they kind of had a system where people worked at table groups first, had some group discussion, and then each table sent a representative to one of several microphones in the room. And then a lot of people had the opportunity to really share what the key takeaways from what their smaller group discussed. So a couple of the things that I highlighted that stood out to me were kind of talking about as organizations are building change management capability, really kind of clearly defining the role and talking about perhaps people that are change practitioners need to kind of elevate their role within organizations. And really, somebody coined the term having a chief change officer in organizations. Some people were talking about maybe changing the term of what we call it, maybe getting rid of the word management and really focus on change executing and change enabling. There was also talk about really recognizing, more and more companies recognizing that change, everyone has a role in change, and really kind of having some standardization of how even different roles within the organization are part of that change management process. And another one that was talking about being the translator between IT and business, and then maybe the new role is becoming change amplifiers for the organization. So there are lots of different ideas. That's only a handful of what I have written down, but those are some of the ideas that are being talked about. So I do think it's a very exciting time, and I'm very looking forward to seeing kind of how the practice evolves going forward. And it sounds like the organization is right behind it. So that was good. Okay, next slide, please. Another takeaway, this is more of a personal takeaway for me. So those who attended the conference may have seen the emails that ACMP sent out. They had this Road to Conference Challenge. I believe this is the first time that they did that. And it was kind of a way to build excitement. And what they did, I think it was for 12 weeks, they highlighted a local chapter, including the SoCal chapter was one of the chapters that they highlighted. And they would, I believe they asked them 4 questions about what their organization is doing in the change management area, how they were preparing for the conference, et cetera. And then they would have a couple of a quick little survey of questions about what you just read about that particular chapter. So I think they took everybody who answered every week and got all the correct answers, and then they had a drawing for a prize. So I turned out to be the grand prize winner. So this was something that happened at the very opening session of the conference. So of course that made it a very memorable session for me. It was a lot of fun. I just enjoyed reading about the different chapters and seeing how all around the world people are practicing change management. So this was more just like icing on the cake. So that was a lot of fun.
So you got the icing on the cake at the beginning of the conference too.
Exactly. So it started on a high note, and the conference was just overall great. So it didn't go down from there. So that's awesome. All right, great. And I'm ready for the next slide. And then the session I wanted to highlight is this session. It was called Be Agile, Driving Change in the Fast Lane. And it was presented by 3 speakers. 2 were from a company Propeller, and 1 was from VMware. So Propeller was the consulting company that VMware hired on a change project. So what was very interesting, you had kind of both the client and consultant perspective. But the reason I attended this one is that my current organization has a very in-ground or inlaid waterfall flow for working on projects, and we are just now beginning to look at Agile. So we often partner with technology partners who are using an Agile process, but we are trying to still work through a waterfall process. So we are now, again, beginning to learn about Agile. So really what I wanted to do was learn more about Agile and then how change management works with Agile. I didn't include all of the different slides. They had a presentation that really kind of explained what Agile is and really gave some of the key benefits of using the Agile methodology. And one thing it did on the next slide, the thing that I wanted to highlight and point out from this is that they gave some tools about how you can assess your organization's readiness for if you want to start approaching the Agile methodology. So they had several different self-assessment tools. This one I really liked because it really kind of gives you a bunch of different things to think about and assess and really lets you know where you are. And it also points in directions of where you might need some more information in order to ensure that your organization is ready for that. So that's why I wanted to highlight this one. But overall, had a very good time at the conference, really learned a lot. So I'm excited to hear what everybody else learned as well. So anybody have any questions? All right, well, thanks.
Thank you, Joel. And this is interesting. I'm curious how many of you on the webinar are actually tasked or are doing change management for Agile projects. Chat in, please, or raise your hand. Because I'm curious what folks who are using it or would be using it, do you find value in this assessment idea? We're getting some yeses, we're getting some raised hands, so definitely.
That's good.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Rashima, over to you.
All right, so I had the opportunity to join a number of very interesting sessions, but one of the reasons I was drawn to this particular session, which was titled The Evolutions of Operations Management, Bringing the Worlds of PMO and CMO Together. It really resonates with the work that I'm doing in my organization right now with working very closely with project management and change management. So it was very timely and very pertinent to the work that I'm doing. So the presentation was led by an organization called GTB, which it has global operations, but it's based in Detroit. I believe they support the auto manufacturers there. And Kiran Chaudhry-Lenz and Dr. Ragid Al-Yafuri were the presenters of that session. And it was standing room only. I think it just shows the interest in these topics. So if we could go to the next slide here. So just a little bit about the organization and the presenters. They had a pretty established project management office, and they were looking to bring in change management to their organization as well, across their organization. So they do, as I mentioned, global operations, 7 locations across the globe. So next slide, please. Okay, so the objectives of the session were, again, to bring project management and change management offices together and to really understand the functions. And the bottom line is that project management and change management both really need each other. And the longer term vision of the group was to bring it to the operational strategy level. So to bring the disciplines of project and change management to that operational strategy level, and a path forward to getting there through the establishment of both the project management office and the more recent formation of the change management office. So next slide, please. So they started out with just some really quick definitions. What's a project management office? And then what's a change management office? If you could go to the next slide quickly here. And what I wanted to highlight about the change management office is during the session, they actually did an informal poll where they asked folks to talk about what are they calling that office in their organization. And so there were a number of terms thrown out. I captured like a dozen: business operations program management, project facilitation office, business transition, business solutions. I mean, the list goes on, and it just shows that the change management office is not consistently named across organizations. And another fact that they mentioned was just the fact that the CMO, or the development of the change management office, is about 10 to 15 years lagging behind kind of the more established project management offices in the research that they cited. So next slide, please. So they really went through kind of the differences between the two, again, mentioning that.
Oh, it sounds like we lost Rashima for a second. Rashima, are you back? We can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Oh, okay. All right, so I was just mentioning that the change management office is very much dependent on having sponsorship, whereas the PMOs are a bit more established in the research that the two speakers cited. And so next slide. So what are the similarities? Ownership of the methodology, that was a consistent one that was cited. Also, just that portfolio management, really bringing together the two disciplines, was very important. And then the structural variations of project management and change management in the organization. And so that leads me to the next slide, which the point I was making earlier about that project management and change management really do need each other. And so I like that they highlighted why each on its own is insufficient. So the PMO without change management office, you know, there's a focus on deliverables. There's not really a focus on the change readiness aspect, instability during change. And then I think with the change management office without the project management office, there's less of that PM triangle focus, less rigor around the project management discipline, and maybe a lack of consistent documentation and a lack of governance. And I think also in my experience, it's been that without having project management, you know, you don't have kind of some hooks to really draw into, where it comes down to like milestones, dates, time frames. Those things are really important for change management activities, that they have a hook that is kind of time based on the life cycle of a project. So next slide. So best, and this is where they really highlighted kind of good, better, best. And this is kind of the ideal scenario, integrating into an operational strategy office. And they talked about kind of the benefits of doing that. And I thought that for where my organization is, this was more aspirational, but I like that they talked specifically about tactics to getting there. And I thought that was really a nice way to really tie all of the things that they had talked about together at the end. And then I think there were a couple folks that might have joined the session. I don't know if you have anything else to highlight or to share. I think I saw a chat come in as well while I was speaking. Well, in either case, I think just for me, if we go to the next slide, some of the key takeaways that, you know, really the ideal scenario is having that holistic operational evolution. And really, again, project management and change management really need to come together, and they do need each other, both disciplines. And I think the aspirational journey of getting to that operational strategy office or the operational strategy level is really the goal and becoming a trusted advisor in the organization. So that was, like I said, a really interesting presentation that I attended, and I thought it was really good participation in the room, and it was standing room only. And there was just, I think it's definitely worth going back and taking a look at this presentation. And then if we can pivot to the next session that I attended,
Yes.
that was really good.
Just a second. So I will switch presenters in just a moment with you, Rashima. Thank you for doing this. As we talked preparing for the session, I was so grateful you picked to speak about this one, because this was one of the sessions I wanted to go to, but there was another one that was interesting, so I didn't get to go to this one. And actually, you know, hearing you talk about it, I think this is so applicable even if your organization is not at a maturity level where you have a change management office or a project management office, which is our situation here. But this is really applicable to the concepts and the practice. We do apply project management or just enough project management on our projects. We do apply change management without having a formalized office. But the bringing those two together, even not in an office formalized concept, but just making sure that both aspects are accounted for and collaborating. I'm making the profi gang sign. You see what I'm doing, right? Because that was what the pieces of the puzzle were showing, right? Is that how others are seeing it as well? That it's not necessarily specifically to a change management office, but it could be more, you know, on a lower level as well.
Yeah. Hi, Anka.
Hi. All right, Rashima, you should be able to share on your end to share your other presentation with us.
All right.
You got it. There it is.
Oh,
perfect.
Okay. Yes. So I attended the session by Karen Ball. It was called Elevate Your Influence by Speaking the Language of Value. And I found this particular session very, very useful and applicable to, I mentioned bringing together project management and change management. That hasn't been always the easiest thing to do. And I think why this particularly resonated with me this session was because we were talking about having that role of roster of all the folks that are involved on any particular initiative, and really sitting down and thinking about the perspective of each and thinking about speaking the language of value. So what I'm going to take you through is just a couple examples that were brought up during the session. So basically looking at this fictional project, which is called Finesta Financial. It's one of ProSci's projects that they use as kind of a case study. And what they did was they had these different roles. So executives, senior leaders, project teams, solution developers, project support SMEs, the first level managers and supervisors, and then employees. And what we did was we actually went role by role, group by group, and we actually defined what we thought the key takeaways or the key what's in it for me items were for each role. And what I liked about this was that I could see doing something similar like this with my project team, just to kind of help people step outside of their role and really look at the bigger picture when it comes down to, in particular, this first level managers and supervisors, which we know is a role that has historically underutilized, underserved, and you know, called upon most frequently in large organizational change. So we went through what matters most to me, and ProSci put together these very neat flashcards, and we actually did an exercise around these flashcards where we had to document for each of these groups what matters most to me in the role of executive, primary sponsor, and so on. And so what you see here on the screen was actually the poll everywhere output that came up as everybody was kind of crowdsourcing answers for each of the roles. And so on the screen here, I'm showing the executives and senior leader and what matters most to those audiences. And you'll notice that obviously things like results, budget, success, cost. Those were the really impactful words that kept coming up in the discussion. And so again, like what I said before, it just really resonated as a very practical example that can be used in discussion with team members, with key stakeholders, to really make sure that the focus is on what matters most to that individual, and speaking that language that matters to those that you're interacting with. So they did incorporate some rules for language learning around design thinking, and I thought that this was fun too, just a way of really, again, putting yourself in the shoes of others and really thinking about what matters most and speaking the language and the words that matter to the individual level. Did anybody else have an opportunity to attend this session? I just thought ProSci always does a great job of really engaging the group and making sure to tap into the collective group for some of these answers and some of the output that was shared.
I'm not seeing any raised hands of anybody else who attended that one.
Okay, well, no worries. I did want to do a quick plug because ProSci is going to be doing the same webinar over the next, I think, week or two. So if you have an opportunity to sign up for that webinar, I do encourage you to. I thought just the conversation, the way that they went through the materials was very, very helpful and very well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Rashima. This was a really interesting one too. And yes, I did sign up for that webinar. Karen is always fantastic to listen to, so I know that will be a good one, but good preview.
Yep.
And if my slides cooperate here, we got that one. All right. So I get to tell you about the session that it was hard to choose which one I wanted to share, but I think this one really hit home with me. And Rashima, Shauna, I think both of you were in that session as well, so please chime in. I really was looking forward to this one because I was hoping for a solution that would help me personally from a change saturation moment or a week or a month when it's been really crazy busy, right, with everything changing. And Carla Howard provided some really fascinating ideas on that. She kicked off with this quote from Jack Welch, and of course, you know, you can't disagree with this. And then she went through tips, very practical tips for how to lead change when everything is changing, right? Tips for getting past your own resistance when you're leading the change. And this was where I was taking a ton of notes. And because she was using the example of her company, Avnet, it's a established for-profit organization, was a little bit foreign to me, but she was using a very specific example, how to use change agility as a competitive weapon, and how to share your story of change with internal stakeholders, with customers, with investors, and with Wall Street. So that was just really fascinating to me, the impact and the audiences that she had to consider. So the couple of biggest takeaways on my end, and I apologize, I know this is kind of hard to see, and this is how it was shared on her slide. She promised she will share the actual template. Her tip was to enable non-change leaders to lead change by making it easy. So having only a few people on her team, on the change management team, if you would, she knew she cannot support all the changes where the company was going through a major transformation. So what they did do is they developed templates of for different types of changes. So for a reorg, for a technology project, for a process change, one pager kind of by stages, what activities should happen when, right? And what templates, what assessments to use. So they invested a lot of time to develop a blueprint that could be handed off to, you know, the project managers or the managers or the leaders for those different initiatives to make sure that change management, even in that form, has a seat at the table, that the seed is planted. So that was a fascinating idea for me. And then they mapped out the journey. This looks to me, the from and to, this is really the behavioral change map, but on an organizational level. So what they're doing now, in our current state, it was, you know, from decentralized, multiple reports, stored in different places, to a centralized platform. And they were actually using visuals on how it's now, how it's going to be, and that was communicated clearly elsewhere, or in different places of, via different media and in different parts of the organization. Here is that one, probably easier to see, right? The journey from and to, and then the communication cadence. They planned it out from annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly. Carla's story here, she said she's been with the company for, I believe, over 10 years. And she was at a point where she had a panic moment. You know, how can we do this? There's so much going on. I can't do this, right? And she said that she actually stopped herself, paused, and asked herself, wait, but what if it could be done? How would it be done if it could, right? Taking yourself out of that panic, that intense fear and stress, what if? How could it be done? And that developed the specific, you know, guidelines, going from to, and planning the annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly check-ins and communication. So I thought that was really interesting. And I just loved one of her last slides. Yeah, the CEO, I believe she said, you know, envisioned that, oh yeah, they'll just transform like, you know, a jet plane, and this is how it really looked like, but it still got accomplished. My takeaway from this visual, I measured. This is really longer, even, you know, even from point A to point B, not accounting for the actual journey, but what can be accomplished is more if we stick with it, right? And actually acknowledge that, yes, it's going to be a difficult road, but if we follow Carla's, you know, best practices, and I have the actual tips for each of the sections. If you want to reach out to me after, I'm happy to share that. My biggest takeaways from her tips was, be honest when you make mistakes and then recover quickly. Speaking the language that speaks to them. So that's in different change methodologies, you know, people call it, you know, speaking in the frame of reference of your targets, right? Or exactly what Rashima was talking about in Karen Ball's session. Connect your future to theirs, engage them in the bigger mission, vision, and visibly demonstrate your commitment to your transformation. And Carla shared the story of the CEO of the company who needed some coaching, and coaching was also, by the way, one of the themes of the conference. There were a lot of sessions on coaching and executive coaching. But from being resistant and, you know, thinking, oh, you know, we'll go from point A to point B, he went through all this difficult, you know, detailed way with them, and he was very active and present. And let's you know, let them record videos and spoke in person, so that was huge. Shauna, Rashima, anything to add on it?
This is Shauna. One of the things that I really, really loved this session. And one of the things that I thought she really tried to hit home on was the necessity of being transparent for people to build trust. And I think that was really important, and that, you know, bringing the stakeholders along the journey with you by letting them be part of the story as it evolves. And those two things, along with, you can never over communicate, were the ones that hit me.
Yeah, I remember that one. She repeated that a few times, right? Making her points that you can never over communicate.
Yeah, this is Rashima. This is Rashima. I wasn't able to actually attend this session, but a lot of what you're saying is resonating with some of the other key takeaways I had from the other sessions.
All right. Any questions or comments on this one? All right. If not, then Carl, are you in a place where you could present now?
Yeah, give me 30 seconds here, and I'll be ready. Pull over somewhere.
I'm gonna pause for a second and switch back to your slide. So we'll just go back with a little backwards travel through slides you've seen already. I know this is not agile, but you know, you have to adjust to what the situation is, right?
That's right.
Almost there, right? All right, I believe that was your first slide, Carl.
I'm waiting for my connection to catch up here. I think, 1 second. There we go. All right. So one of the sessions I attended and liked a lot was Straight Talk, Critical Ingredient for Creating Movement and Change by Alex Ray. He pointed out that, you know, 33% of the 70% of projects that fail to achieve their goals, the cause of that, so nearly half of projects failing, is due to management does not align. And I was really talking about we need to stretch the leadership and use straight talk in order to align leadership in order to achieve goals. And for me, the interesting part was he tied this to the neuroscience, that really our behavior, our natural behavior is not to openly share and be open and honest and tell the truth. It's linked to a fear of, you know, if I'm open and honest, if I say I don't understand something, or if I say I don't agree with something, I'll be perceived as negative. They'll find out that I, you know, that I'm a fraud. I really don't know what I'm doing. All these fears go in. So when the negative fear kicks in, there's a piece of the brain that kicks into basically the fear of flight reaction, and says, well, I'm going to say what I need to, you know, survive this situation. The interesting piece is that the brain is not good at understanding the difference between social pain and physical pain, and responds as if it's physical pain and puts you in that flight mode. And so really the key to overcoming this is really to understand when you are in that state, you know, that your body is telling you to go down this road, and to be able to, as a team, you know, be able to create that psychologically safe space, you know, to say, hey, look, you've triggered a response in me, you know, I need to back it off a little bit, right? You're pushing my buttons. Let me back it off so that I can be open to ideas and understand, you know, the pieces of what you're saying that may be useful, and understand why this is threatening to me. If you show the next slide, taking a second to load up here. He's created all of this into this graph, and it's kind of the line in the middle is the focus point. And if you're above the line, you're not threatened, and you're open, you're curious, you're questioning. You can discuss and come to good solutions. It's a discussable problem. If you're triggered below the line, you've got to be right. You're defensive. You're closed. And at this point, there are topics that are undiscussable, or things that you can't talk about as a group. It's a hot subject, and you can't talk about it. So your brain and your dinosaur brain is triggered into that state. So it's really what's your mind state, above the line or below the line, where issues are discussable. Next slide. So it sounds like his business is really going in and helping, executive teams, coaching them through this. How do they really establish a team process? And one of his takeaways is, you've got to teach the whole team and not just the quarterback, right? You can't just train one person. It's got to be done as a group, as a team. When he goes in and does this, he does it on something that's real and is high stakes, that people have skin in the game. Because if it's just a training exercise, it doesn't get real, right? You don't trigger that emotion like, oh, you're going to take my resources away from me? No, I'm going to fight back on that, right? So it needs to be real. And the goal is to create that psychologically safe space so that people can understand that they're triggering others. They're understanding if they're shutting down and not being part of the conversation, that others in the room, get to know them and recognize that and say, hey, it looks like you've shut down. What did I say that triggered you, right? And to be able to create that safe space where they can express that, yeah, what you're claiming there is really, it's affecting me, psychologically, right? So how do we get back to an open dialogue where we can solve this problem together? So his steps for doing that were listen and be curious, share thinking back and forth. So again, you're above the line there. But really to monitor your own state of mind and understand when you've been triggered below the line, and ask yourself, why was I triggered below the line? And when you can do that, you've pulled yourself back into your conscious brain. You can overcome the dinosaur brain and not see it as a threat, and understand what state of mind you're in. So then, the group together then can work on, oh, okay, we stepped over a line here. And again, eventually the group gets better and better at understanding where everybody else is, and also, what everybody else's triggers are and how to avoid them, and keep the discussion productive. Okay. And that was it for the straight talk. Can I
ask you a question on this one? Do you remember if he quoted any references or resources? Because this sounds familiar to me, and I can't place it. I don't think I've seen him, but this sounds.
He did actually. His presentation is full of books that are triggered on the topics. Right, there's a ton of references to this, and I think in the. There was one that stood out that somebody touched on in one of the other sessions, right, was really that, trying to think what I was thinking, that, change management is a combination of things, right? It's organization design, it's PM, it's psychology, it's neuroscience all together, right? So this, it touches on all of those pieces.
Right. All right, I might take a look at actually the copy of his full slide deck. So this was great. Thank you.
There was another place that it ties in. I think Google came out with a penultimate study on productive teams, and their number one reason necessary to create a high functioning team is that psychological safe space.
Right.
The teams that failed to create a psychologically safe space. People stayed within their own shell and didn't help the team.
Right. Right. Thank you.
All right. Another session, just a quick plug on here, was a session by Microsoft, and it was called Measuring Adoption and Change Management ROI. Very interesting. Microsoft obviously has identified that getting their customers to a better adoption state is good for their business. So they have created a change management program for adopting Microsoft technologies, at the enterprise level. And they actually have a small piece of their consulting group. He said about 100 consultants that do go into companies and help them with an enterprise adoption and doing the change management piece of it. But at this web link here, they have created the process and tools, and I believe it's ADCAR aligned, but created all the tools that they use to do those adoption change managements. And they basically said, hey, this would work for any technology rollout. Cross off the Microsoft product and put in the name of the technology you're putting in. And here's the roadmap for how you do it, including a case study example using all the tools. So a pretty interesting site. They are also encouraging partners to come in and partner with Microsoft to be a change management, adoption change management partner that they can refer. They said they claimed that the market for these adoptions is about $9 billion. They figured their 100 consultants could handle about 5% of that market. So as they're trying to get their customers to adopt more change management or get more value out of their software adoptions, right, they're seeing a need for change management. So lots of useful tools there to take a look at.
Excellent, thank you.
And lastly, I had the closing keynote speaker was Seth Godin. Very interesting to listen to, as you might imagine, as a keynote speaker. Key points I found interesting here where he said basically the industrial revolution was to make more, make it faster. And basically, all businesses are set up to go up and to the right. And he showed this hilarious little graph. So it's like, that's what we know. But unfortunately, this makes consumer products very average. Everything is a commodity. It's all the same. And he translated that into now the connection economy. Things are different. Things are being successful depends on coordination, trust, permission, exchange of ideas. Explaining that the normal curve is melting. The space in the middle is no longer as big as the space within the tails. Think of the long tail. What people are aiming for now in the connection economy is the smallest viable market. So think of apps, right? They're looking for a true believer audience that may be very small, but because their cost of putting it together may not be great as well. So they can live in that space. So he's saying, yeah, you can't design it for everyone. It'll fail, right? You won't connect with anyone. So it's about connecting deeply with the customers. And this is the evolution of change. One of the other programs was saying, CM is a Venn diagram of project management, OD, psychology, right? So there's a very small space at the center, but that's, things live now within those spaces in the center that they find their audience. Interesting, he said, change always begins with the weird people. They're outside of the norm. So again, the long tail early adopters. And where he took all of this was that everything eventually where he sees it going is that we need to get away from commodities. It's really only original work that's going to have value. And he was saying things like art, creating this original creative value is where it's going to be, once you're outside of the normal curve. So I don't know if there was one more sentence at the bottom there that I'm not seeing. Lead, take responsibility, make change. So, Very good speaker, very interesting to hear. I don't know if anyone else heard that session.
Yeah, I was mesmerized by this session. I have to tell you, I was sitting way in the back, and this was the closing keynote. Right before he came on stage, we actually had the charity that ACMP collected donations for. This was the first time ACMP did that. So in the call for when you registered for the conference, there was a call to bring a book, a children's book, in your language that think would bring value to a child, right? It was, I'm blanking on the name of the charity. But it's a local one in Florida that's sort of like Make-A-Wish. foundation, but it basically allows to fulfill a wish for a very sick child who would want to come to either Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World. And they are actually, their goal is to make it happen as quickly as possible, because sometimes those children don't live long enough to get their wish fulfilled. So they say they can make it happen within 2 days and actually coordinate everything. So those were donations to the charity. And the speaker from the charity brought me to tears, you know, talking about those children and showing, you know, examples of how they work and how they transformed. They have success stories where they transformed lives. They had other stories when it wasn't successful, right? But after that emotional, you know, prequel, then Seth came on with his energy and change and, you know, and creativity. So I think it was just such an interesting contrast that the change and tension was really resonating with me. I don't know what do others think who attended that.
Yeah, this is Shauna. I thought that the presentation about the charity was really well done, and I wish they would have done that on day one instead of at the end. But what I found fascinating is how it flowed into Seth's presentation. Because part of Seth's presentation was really about just go and do it. Quit asking, quit talking, just go do it. And that's kind of what that charity did. Is you know, somebody in Florida's area heard about some of the things that were going on and just decided that they made it their moral imperative to fix it. And that's how they were able to establish that charity and to be able to turn around something as remarkable as getting a child's wish taken care of in 2 days or less.
Yeah, more on that charity, I thought very interesting. They were saying that they've established their own basically hotel or camp, they call it, right? So they're not dependent on a different hotel for availability or anything like that, but they can meet the special needs of the kids there as well. But that they every night is themed, and it's holiday themed. They're like, they've got Tuesdays is Halloween and Wednesdays are Christmas, right? And they're like, yeah, because some of these kids won't make it, you know, to the next Halloween or Christmas, so we don't want them to miss it. So, you know, we do a full year of holidays here every week.
Yeah, and Joel, you are so good. You just shared in the chat, the name of the charity is Give Kids the World Village. So they were phenomenal, and they were such a great setup for Seth. But yes, we could have learned more about them. I think even leading up to the conference, that would have been huge value. All right, excellent. Any questions? Questions, comments from the audience? Otherwise, we really hope to see you next year in Anaheim. I hope that this gave everybody a little you know, preview of what that conference is all about. You know, this was just our highlights, and I realized we all of us probably could talk about many more sessions. I asked the speakers to select no more than 2 or 3. So this was really just to give you a little taste of how this is. We definitely want to be present at next year's conference in Anaheim, and I hope most of you, if not all of you here in the audience, can attend next year. The registration is already open for next year's conference. It's still, the earlier you register, the cheaper it is. The first 100 rate is still on, which means not even 100 people registered just yet. But then, you know, with time, the registration goes up. Please be in touch with us if you have ideas for speakers, for, you know, how our chapter can contribute and be more present at that conference. We definitely need that big picture, but, you know, what other ideas may you have? Brian is asking if the presentation slides are available to our members. Brian, do you mean this presentation that we've done, or the presentation slides from the presenters that we share, the full slide deck from the presenters? Because we can definitely make this one available. I will have to check with Global if we can share the full slide deck. Yeah, this one, the slide deck we just presented here, will definitely make available. Any other questions? And I can actually unmute you all, guys, so that you can speak up.
I have a general question. You know, I was hearing more and more how you know, change management is becoming more of just a leadership competency within organizations. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna mute all, and Carl, unmute you because somebody has us on hold. So hang on just a second.
Hello?
Hi, this is Brian Schrader. I've cut myself off. I apologize there. I typed the response in the chat session. Can everybody hear me?
I can.
And Hannah, did you see my response there? I was interested in the slides, obviously from the conference.
We seem to be having technical difficulties.
Yeah, it looks like she's on mute.
You muted yourself.
Yeah.
Did I mute myself? I muted
Yeah.
myself.
There.
Hey,
Yeah.
accomplished.
Anna, this is Brian Schrader. I apologize. I hung up unintentionally, and so right when you were asking me to answer the question, so I apologize for that.
I'm sorry, and I will double check with Global on sharing the full year deck, the slide deck.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Definitely.
So my question was about, you know, in different sessions and that, in different conversations, right, hearing more and more that more organizations recognizing, you know, the importance of change management are making it more just a leadership competency, and they're training leaders throughout the organization in change management, some also in project management as well. So really just, you know, this is how we lead things and get them done and make change in the company. And this is elevating the change management office or the change management people there to more of a facilitator role, facilitating, you know, people that already know how to do it and not having to do all of the change themselves, but be there as more of a coach for those people in the organization that are doing change. Just wondered if anybody else had more, you know, came across that or saw that as a trend.
This is Shauna. I actually, you know, I have noticed that as a trend, and I think as more and more people understand that it doesn't matter if it's your work life or your personal life, change is all around you constantly, that, you know, more people are beginning to understand it from that perspective, and that it's part of everyone's role. In order to make it work and be effective and to have things adopted, it's got to be part of everyone's role.
Yeah, I like the thought a lot, right? Because it puts change there right at the initiation of an idea, that it's, you know, thought up like, how are we going to change to get into this, right? So that the people starting the idea are aware that they're going to need change management.
So this is Shauna. I just had one question, Anka, on the slides from the change saturation is a myth. Did you have any luck reaching out to her to get an actual copy of that that template that they provided?
So Carla promised she would share that in the app and in the materials. I haven't seen yet, but I know how to get hold of her, so I will reach out.
I think that would be really valuable for a lot of people.
Yes. I'll get back to you on that. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. This was great. This felt like a refresher of the conference, and now I want to go back and learn more. So thank you for taking over an hour of your time to join us today, and looking forward to see you next year in Anaheim, but hopefully see you sooner than that in one of our chapter events. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.